My name's Elise. I'm 34 years old, and I've been in a committed relationship for 11 of those years. I used to think we were one of the lucky ones. The kind of couple people look at and go, God, I hope we're like them in 10 years. We were the inside joke people. The hold hands in the grocery store people. I thought we were solid. But lately, there's this quiet panic humming beneath my skin, like I've been slowly, imperceptibly unraveling, and no one's noticed. Not even him. I keep asking myself, how did I not see it sooner? Maybe it's because the unraveling doesn't happen with some big, cinematic betrayal. It starts with smaller things. A kiss that lands slightly off, like your faces no longer remember how to find each other. A touch on your back that used to soothe you, but now feels like a nudge. Or maybe a check-in text that feels more like a chore than a connection. I ignored those moments for months. Maybe years. His name is Adam. He's 36, a landscape architect, and the first man I ever truly let in. We met at a mutual friend's bonfire party when I was 23, and he reached over to hand me a beer with this stupidly charming half-smile, like he knew I'd say something sarcastic. I did. And he laughed like he saw through every defense I didn't even know I had. That night, we talked for 6 hours straight, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the kind of love people write songs about. And for a long time it was. Sex was easy, abundant, spontaneous. We'd barely make it out of the car sometimes. Our apartment was always a little messy, because we were busy choosing each other over laundry or dishes. He used to trace the inside of my wrist in bed, slow and deliberate, like he was learning me by heart. I used to fall asleep on his chest, feeling safer than I'd ever felt in my life. But somewhere along the way, things got muted. Not bad. Not dramatic. Just quiet. He still kisses me goodbye most mornings, but it's quick, automatic. Like muscle memory. Last week, I leaned into him while brushing my teeth, something I used to do when I wanted a lazy morning cuddle, and he stiffened. Not a lot, just enough to make me notice. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. We stayed there for a second too long, both pretending it was natural. And last month, we had sex for the first time in a while. I wore the red slip he used to love, the one that made him practically drag me to the bedroom the first time he saw it. But this time, when he looked at me, his eyes didn't light up. He smiled, that same polite, distracted smile he gives the neighbors. And when it was over, he rolled away without the usual soft joke or warm tangle of legs. I lay there, cold air settling between us, and thought, did we just have sex, or did we just go through the motions of having sex? I still love him. At least, I think I do. But sometimes it feels like I'm loving the memory of him. Or worse, the version of him I created in my head. The version who always noticed when I was slipping, who pulled me back in before I even asked. I started noticing he stopped asking questions. About my day. My thoughts. What I'm reading. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that he's elsewhere. Not in a dramatic, storm out of the house kind of way. More like his mind lives in a room I don't have the key to anymore. The moment I realized something had changed was on a random Tuesday night. We were watching a documentary about family secrets, not even a particularly good one. The narrator said, sometimes the person you trust most isn't who you think they are, and Adam didn't even flinch. But something about the way he kept his eyes glued to the screen, his jaw clenched just a little tighter, made my stomach turn. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in 11 years, he felt like a stranger sitting 2 feet away. I didn't say anything. I didn't even shift. But that was the night I stopped pretending nothing was wrong. Adam's always been the kind of man who builds things with his hands. Patios, gardens, porches, entire landscapes that didn't exist until he touched them. When he loves you, he fixes things. That's how he shows up. But I'm not a lawn that needs paving. And lately, it feels like he's trying to plaster over cracks without even asking why they're there. Last Saturday morning, I was sitting on the porch with my coffee, scrolling through photos for a presentation I was building for work. I run a small branding studio, lots of client calls, lots of pixel-perfect details. Adam came out with that goofy grin he always wears after a successful week. He'd just finished a huge design for the city park downtown, something he was proud of. He leaned down to kiss my neck, both hands on my shoulders, and whispered, "You've been working too hard. I miss this body." I flinched before I could stop myself. Not because I didn't love his touch, but because, in that moment, it felt like he was reaching for the only version of me he still recognized. The one who used to jump him in the middle of dinner prep. The one who never had dark circles under her eyes or two-day-old dry shampoo. I offered a forced smile and shifted the laptop between us like a shield. "Almost done," I said. "Just need to send this deck by noon." He sighed, not in frustration, but something heavier. Like disappointment. He rubbed my shoulders in slow circles, trying to make it romantic. "We could go back to bed for a bit. Like we used to." I wanted to say, "Then ask me how I'm doing. Ask me why I've been up late every night this week. Ask me if I'm okay, Adam." But I didn't. Instead, I said, "I have a deadline," and the way his hands dropped told me I had, once again, chosen the wrong thing to say. Later that night, he tried again. He lit candles in the bedroom. Put on the old Norah Jones vinyl he knew I loved in our 20s. I stood in the doorway, watching the flickering shadows dance across our dresser, and felt this deep ache that I couldn't name. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to reset us. Reignite something. But when he kissed me, it felt like a question I didn't know how to answer. His hand slid under my shirt, gentle, familiar, but my mind had already drifted somewhere else. I was thinking about the email I forgot to send. About the documentary. About how he hadn't noticed the new painting I'd hung in the hallway a week ago. He noticed everything in the world outside. That was his job. A gifted observer. But lately, I didn't feel seen at all. "Can we just lie down for a bit?" I said quietly. He didn't argue. Just nodded, pulled back, and climbed into bed next to me. We lay there, side by side, not touching. I wanted to reach for him, but I also wanted him to reach for me. The version of me that cried in the car last week for no reason. The me that needed more than kisses to feel close again. Eventually, he turned toward me and said, "You're pulling away." And even though he was right, I hated that it sounded like an accusation. Like I was the one who had changed, and he was just the collateral damage. I don't feel like you really ask me anything anymore," I whispered. "You try to fix things by touching me, but I'm not there yet." He went quiet. His jaw worked in that way it does when he's trying not to be defensive. "I don't know what you want me to do." I stared at the ceiling. "Sometimes, I don't either. I just want you to see me. Not just want me." He reached for my hand, laced our fingers together. It was sweet. It was a start. But it still felt like touching a bruise and calling it healing. That night, he fell asleep fast. I lay next to him in the dark, listening to his breath even out, wondering if maybe, just maybe, loving someone for a long time isn't the same as knowing them anymore. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure which of us had changed first. Adam made pancakes that morning. Real ones, with the crispy edges and the blueberries I liked squished right into the batter so they'd caramelize. He set them down in front of me with a flourish, proud, like it was some grand gesture. "See?" He grinned, kissing the top of my head. "I remember things." I smiled because I wanted to. Because it was sweet. But there was that ache again, that small, sharp tug somewhere behind my ribs. He remembered blueberries, but not the last time I told him I felt invisible. "Thanks," I said, and took a bite I barely tasted. He sat next to me at the kitchen island, sipping his coffee, thigh pressing into mine. A casual touch, but it felt weightier than it used to, like the start of something he was hoping would lead somewhere else. My fork paused midair. "I was thinking we could take the bikes out after breakfast," he said. "Do that loop around the lake. Get some air, shake off whatever's been." He cut himself off. "You know. Just us." I nodded slowly. "Maybe. But I didn't mean it." I was already picturing the forced conversation, the silences he wouldn't know how to fill. How we'd get home sweaty and tired, and he'd reach for me like he always did, mistaking movement for connection. Later, I was at the sink rinsing dishes when he came up behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist and kissed the back of my neck. A soft, slow kiss, one he probably thought would melt me. Instead, I stiffened. He didn't seem to notice at first. His hand slid down my hips, and I felt his breath against my ear. "You smell like lemons," he murmured, like it was a compliment. I let out a small, nervous laugh. "It's just the dish soap." He chuckled, then gave my butt a playful smack. That familiar one. The kind that used to make me spin around and grab him by the collar. But this time I flinched, not visibly, but enough for the air in my lungs to catch. He noticed. "What?" he asked, half laughing. "Too early for ass slaps?" I turned off the water, trying not to sound sharp. "It's not that. I'm not in the mood." He paused. "It was just a joke." "I know," I said. And I did. But something about the way he touched me, automatic, expectant, made my skin crawl and ache at the same time. Adam sighed and leaned against the counter. "Elise, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying here." I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, all I saw was the boyish man I fell in love with. The one who used to light up when I walked into a room. He was trying, in the only way he knew how. Through touch. Through pancakes. Through affection laced with desire. But I needed something deeper. Something quieter. Something that said, "I see you're not okay, let's talk about it before I try to kiss it away." "I'm not trying to push you out," I said softly. I'm not where you are right now." Adam nodded, lips tight, disappointed. Not in me, but in the fact that he couldn't fix this with the tools he had. Later that night, we watched TV on the couch, and he pulled me into his arms. I let him. But as his fingers traced slow, hopeful lines along my thigh, I stared blankly at the screen. I wanted to want him. God, I missed wanting him. But all I could think, louder than the TV, louder than his breath against my ear, was, why does everything have to turn into sex? It happened on a Tuesday. The same night Adam made carbonara from scratch, like he used to when we were broke and playing house in our first apartment. He even set the table. Candles. Wine. My favorite playlist humming low in the background. It should have felt romantic. It should have felt like something. Instead, the minute I sat down, my chest tightened. I watched him scoop pasta onto my plate, proud, eager, unaware. And I felt this rising panic, like I was being handed a script for a life I no longer recognized but was still expected to perform in. "This looks amazing," I said, though the words tasted like cardboard. I twirled a bite on my fork, willing myself to match his warmth. He sat across from me, grinning. "Told you I could still impress you." "You've always been good at that," I said, and took a bite I barely chewed. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that used to feel comfortable, but now just exposed how far we drifted. "I was thinking," he said finally, "maybe we take a trip. Just us. No work. No stress. We haven't been away in forever." I looked up, startled by the hope in his voice. I don't want to fix this with a trip, Adam, I said before I could soften it. That's not. It won't change anything. His brow furrowed. Okay. So what will? I dropped my fork. The clink against the plate was louder than it should have been. I don't know. Maybe you stop pretending everything's fine just because you made dinner. He blinked, confused. I'm trying, Elise. I know, I said, voice cracking. But it's like you're trying to reach me without actually seeing me. I'm not okay, Adam. And I don't think you even notice. He pushed his plate back slightly, arms crossing. You've been shutting me out for months. I try to be close, and you act like I'm some stranger grabbing you on the street. I'm not psychic, Elise, you have to let me in. Let you in? I snapped. How can I let you in when I don't even know what's real anymore? He stared at me like I'd slapped him. What does that even mean? And that's when it broke. Everything I'd been holding in, the confusion, the anger, the grief I didn't understand, it all exploded. My dad isn't who I thought he was. Adam blinked. What? I stood up too fast, knocking over my wine glass. Red bled across the tablecloth like a wound. I didn't care. I found out last week, I said, pacing now. He had an affair. 4 years. My whole childhood, he had this other woman, this other life, and my mom never told me. No one did. Adam was silent. I laughed, sharp and hollow. You know what that does to a person? To suddenly look back on your whole childhood and wonder what was true? His voice was quiet. Why didn't you tell me? I don't know. I yelled. Because I didn't know how. Because I didn't want to believe it. Because everything suddenly felt like it had cracks I'd never seen before, you included. He stood slowly, walking toward me. Elise. I'm not your dad. I know that, I whispered. But the way I've been feeling lately, like something's been off between us, and I couldn't name it, when I found out about him, it made sense. Like maybe I've been chasing a version of love that was always just, pretend. He looked like I'd gutted him. You really think that's what this is? That I've been faking it with you? No, I said, tears falling fast now. I think I have. The silence between us was so loud it felt physical. I don't know how to come back from this, I said finally. He didn't answer. Just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes flicking between the ruined dinner and the shaking woman he used to know. Later that night, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the untouched trip brochure he'd left on my pillow. My eyes burned. My chest ached. I wanted to go to him. To say I was sorry. That I was scared. That I didn't know how to stop this freefall I'd started. But I didn't. Instead, I curled into myself under the covers and whispered into the dark, why does everything have to turn into sex? Why can't it ever just be safety? It's been 12 days since the meltdown. 12 mornings of quiet coffee, 12 nights of lying in the same bed but worlds apart. We orbit each other now, careful, polite. Like two strangers who used to be in love and are trying not to bump into the ghosts. Adam doesn't touch me anymore. Not even the small things, the casual back of the shoulder squeeze as we pass in the kitchen, the hand on my lower back when we wait in line at the grocery store. He's gone silent in all the ways that used to be soft. He still makes dinner. Still folds my laundry. Still fixes things around the house, a leaky faucet, a door that squeaks, the loose towel bar in the guest bathroom. But he never asks how I'm feeling. And I never ask what he's thinking. Sometimes I watch him from the hallway when he doesn't know I'm there. Last night, he sat on the couch with his head in his hands for 10 minutes straight. No phone. No TV. Just stillness. That kind of stillness that comes after you've run out of ways to try. He looked like someone grieving something he couldn't name. And I realized, maybe he was. We both were. I've been trying to find the words for what I feel, but they keep changing. One minute it's guilt, sharp and acidic. The next, it's longing. I miss him. I miss the sound of his laugh when he's not trying to impress me. I miss the way he'd absent-mindedly hum while brushing his teeth. I miss how safe he used to feel. But I don't know how to reach for him without crumbling. And the truth is, he didn't deserve that night. Not like that. Not the way I dumped my father's sins at his feet and called them ours. He's been carrying the weight of my silence, and I've been punishing him for not understanding a language I never taught him. This morning, he came into the kitchen and stood beside me while I was loading the dishwasher. He didn't touch me. Didn't say anything. Just stood there like maybe that would be enough, and part of me wanted to lean into it. To say something small and human, like, "Do you want coffee?" or, "Can we start over?" But I didn't. I just nodded toward the sink, and he walked away. And now, sitting here on the edge of our bed again, same spot, same hollow ache, I wonder if this is what the end looks like. Not fireworks. Not betrayal. Just two people who loved each other, forgetting how to say "I'm scared" instead of "I'm angry." Maybe this isn't about sex or distance or even my dad. Maybe it's about two people who never learned how to fall back into each other when life blew everything apart. I want to try again. I do. But I don't know if he still wants me to. I don't know if the version of me that's here now, bruised, confused, and far less romantic, is someone he even recognizes. But I also don't want to walk away from a man who once loved every inch of me, before I started pulling away from him, and before I stopped letting him in. So I close the laptop. I stand up. And I walk toward the living room, not with a plan, but with something softer, a beginning. I found him on the back porch that night, sitting in the dark with a blanket over his shoulders and an untouched beer sweating beside him. He didn't look up when I opened the sliding door. Just said quietly, "Didn't think you'd come out." I sat beside him, pulled my knees up to my chest. The night air was cool, and the world felt hushed, like even the sky was holding its breath. "I owe you an apology," I said. His lips pressed into a thin line. "For what?" "For making you responsible for something that wasn't yours to carry. For disappearing into myself and then blaming you for not dragging me back." He didn't speak for a while. Just nodded, slow. "I didn't know how to help," he said eventually. "Every time I tried to get close, you'd flinch. I started feeling like the villain in our house." "You weren't." I paused. "You're not." He looked at me then. Eyes tired. Still kind. But different, like something in them had dimmed. "I love you," I whispered. It came out uneven. Fragile. He reached over and took my hand. His thumb brushed mine. Familiar, tender. Not romantic. Not anymore. "I know," he said. "But I think we lost the part where that used to be enough." Tears welled, but I blinked them back. "So what now?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he leaned in and pressed a kiss to my forehead. "A goodbye, not a beginning." "I'll take the couch tonight," he said gently. And he meant it, not as punishment, but as a kindness. A letting go. I watched him disappear into the house. I stayed out there until the porch light turned itself off. That night, I didn't cry. Not until I heard him turning over on the couch in the dark, the springs creaking, the sound of someone trying to sleep through grief. I think love doesn't always die in anger or betrayal. Sometimes it just wears thin. Wears out. Especially when neither of you knows how to stop the unraveling. In the morning, I made him coffee. We sat across from each other like old friends. No accusations. No blame. Just quiet, aching respect for the years we'd shared. Somewhere inside me, a new kind of knowing settled in. Not all endings are failures. Some are just truths we were too afraid to speak sooner. And though I'd walk away from Adam in the weeks that followed, I'd carry his kiss on my forehead with me, not as closure, but as proof. That we tried. That we mattered. That even quiet love can leave a scar. Hi. I don't really know why I'm recording this, maybe just to get it out of my body. It's been 5 months. Since Adam. Since the night everything cracked open. Since I found out my father, the man who used to tuck me in, who taught me how to drive, who cried when I graduated, had lived a second life I never knew about. A hidden one. With another woman. A shadow family. A truth buried so deep, even my mother pretended not to see it. You grow up believing certain things are solid. That love means safety. That home is truth. That if someone really loves you, they won't lie to you. But life has a way of tearing open those certainties and making you look at what's actually there. And sometimes, what's there is not what you hoped. I blamed Adam. Not on purpose. But I did. He was the closest thing I could touch when everything else fell apart. And he tried, he really did. But I was unraveling, and I wanted him to pull me back in when I wasn't even sure I wanted to be in that life anymore. Desire is funny. You think it's about sex, or chemistry, or effort. But sometimes, desire dies quietly, when the person next to you stops feeling like a witness and starts feeling like a mirror. One you don't want to look into anymore. And it wasn't that I didn't love Adam. It's that I didn't love who I was becoming in that house. How every kiss felt like a performance. How every hug started to feel like an obligation. How every time he touched me, my skin wanted to want it, but my mind was already somewhere else, retreating. I used to think intimacy was about how close someone could get to your body. But it's not. It's how close someone can get to your truth. And my truth had changed. He wasn't the villain. And I wasn't the victim. We were just two people trying to hold on to something we didn't know how to repair. I'll always be grateful for the way he loved me, fully, practically, loyally. But love isn't always enough to keep two people on the same path. Sometimes, it takes breaking to realize you were bending for too long. Since then, I've learned how to be alone again. I've stopped trying to make my body behave like a barometer of how lovable I am. I've started listening to myself, not just reacting. I go to therapy. I read books I used to pretend I didn't have time for. I sit in silence and let the ache speak without trying to mute it. And I've started to forgive my father, not because what he did was okay, but because holding on to the wound didn't protect me. It only poisoned everything else. Here's what I know now: you can love someone deeply and still grow apart. You can long for touch and still flinch from it. You can miss someone even while knowing you're better off without them. And sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from the comfort of the known, into the wild, terrifying clarity of who you really are. So, no. My dad wasn't who I thought he was. And maybe, neither was I. But that doesn't mean we stop searching. It means we get to begin again, this time with our eyes open. And if I ever fall in love again, it won't be because someone wants me, touches me, claims me. It'll be because they see me. And stay.